Esquire magazine, and also senior political analyst Rebecca Berg, national political reporter for Real Clear Politics. Thank you both for joining us. Vicki, you have written a big profile piece on Jared Kushner for Esquire magazine. We don't hear very much about him. What is he really like?
Well, Jared is a very, very shrewd tactician. When I wrote my piece in the summer, Kevin Ryan, the .com entrepreneur, said to me, you know, he's in it to win it. And indeed, it has proven so. What's very interesting, Don, is that a lot of people in the New York real estate industry and sort of New York social circles, I think, sort of withdrew a bit from Jared during the campaign. But now that he is right there with the president-elect, they're all sort of saying, oh, thank goodness, because Jared is so smart. And I think that you know, that's very interesting.
Why did they withdraw? Because they weren't so sure?
Well, because I think, as we've seen in this election, you know, New York was in one camp, and Jared Kushner, and I felt this when I was reporting the piece in the summer, really sort of was strategizing and understood where middle America was. And it turned out, you know what, his math and his understanding of social media, you know, his calculations were right, and he was very, very central in the Trump campaign, and I'm sure Donald Trump feels that, which is why he wants him so close with him.
It is said that he has been, you know, at the center of the transition team, and according to reports that maybe he's, you know, part of the so-called turmoil that's happening there, and that's been disputed. They're saying there's no turmoil, but anyway, we know that his father, he also is said to have gotten rid of Chris Christie, and his father, Charles Kushner, was sent to prison at the hands of Chris Christie. And in an article, here's what you write. You said, prison in Alabama in 2005, Jared was still working on a joint business and law degree at NYU. Since a convicted felon cannot, as a matter of practice, sign a contract as a fiduciary, he felt that he had no choice other than to take over the family business. In his interview with New York, meaning it was New York Magazine that you were talking about, he acknowledged that his father had made a mistake, while at the same time insisting that Charles had been unfairly punished for his crimes. He's made no secret of the fact that he sees his father still as an extraordinary man, and that he believes in his filial of duty to put the Kushner name back at the top. So he is driven to restore the family name. You think that's part of what is guiding him now?
I do. But I also think that Jared Kushner is, you know, he is a very ambitious, smart tactician whose career in some ways almost eclipses that of his father-in-law. If you think that 12 years ago he was, as I wrote, you know, in his early 20s, his father had been gone to jail, and instead of sort of changing his name and moving to California, as a lot of people would do, he doubled down. He bought the most expensive building at the time in New York. He crossed the river, rather like Donald Trump had done many years before him from Queens. It starts to rehabilitate the Kushner name, buys a newspaper, which is really a sort of a marker, and then he's an Orthodox Jew, and he marries a very prominent, you know, the very prominent Ivanka Trump, who converts to marry him. So these are all actions of someone. I mean, people talk about Jared as being low key, but actually, if you look at the trajectory of his career, and now there he is, right by the president-elect, it's really all of it adds up to an extraordinary statement, really.
It's probably, Ivanka probably saw a lot of her father in him.
I don't doubt it.
So at 35 years old, and maybe one of the most powerful people in the country, are you surprised by that, having met him and knowing him?
No, not at all. I saw sort of when I was reporting this piece in the summer, just how determined he was, you know, and it's real for him. He really believes in Donald Trump. I think they do have this kinship. They do, because they've both grown up around the real estate industry. They know, they both understand how to pivot. I think they both feel the same way, actually, about the media. One of the things I reported was that, you know, Jared was not well liked by his newsroom, and that, you know what, he didn't care particularly.
And he's a member of the media.
He's an owner, and I think that he sees that very clearly. I think that he was in it. He owned the New York Observer because he was sort of interested to see if he could modernize it. And interestingly, in the last few days, the Observer has just gone purely online.
Yeah, and I was telling you before, it was interesting because you know, he talks at Donald Trump rallies against the New York Times, but recently, maybe a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I got a copy of the Observer, which is a paper he owns. inside of my New York Times subscription at my front door, and I said, wow, this is interesting to, that this is happening. But I got to get Rebecca in. Rebecca, as a member of the Trump family, can Jared Kushner even get a job at the White House? Aren't there rules about that?
There are nepotism laws, Don, that prevent family members, including in-laws, from taking salaried positions, but that wouldn't preclude Jared Kushner from taking an unsalaried position or acting as a sort of informal kitchen cabinet sort of advisor to Donald Trump, as he has been doing throughout this campaign process. And so that's why we're hearing these reports of Jared Kushner perhaps getting a security clearance. He's clearly very much still in the mix, very much a trusted advisor to Donald Trump and his team. And I would be very surprised, actually, if we did not see him taking some sort of informal role in the Trump White House, because he has been so instrumental throughout this campaign, not only to shaping the direction of the campaign and the strategy, but really keeping this team together. We talked so much throughout this campaign about all of the tumultuous turns in this campaign, all of the different leaders, from Corey Lewandowski to Paul Manafort to Steve Bannon, the different iterations of this campaign. Jared Kushner has been a thread throughout. He has been one of the things holding this campaign together, and I think we can expect that to continue as this campaign moves from campaign mode into the White House.
Can we see him as part of a daily briefing every day, even as you said, if he takes on a voluntary role?
Well, we're seeing that in the transition now, potentially, but when it gets to the White House, it gets to be a little bit murkier, because if you're in an informal, unsalaried position, then this does raise questions of conflicts of interest. And of course, there's this dynamic where the adult children, Ivanka, Eric, and Donald Trump Jr., are going to be running the family business as part of a blind trust to try to create this wall of separation between Donald Trump as
really
president.
a blind trust, is it?
It's not really, no. And so that's something we've been talking about throughout. Like, is this actually going to prevent conflicts of interest? Well, it's the setup that they have planned so far. But Jared Kushner married to Ivanka Trump, that really starts to tear down this wall of separation even further, raises more questions of conflicts of interest.
Did you want to get in on this? Did you want to say something?
Well, no, but I think that well, yes, because I think that, to me, knowing, I've also reported on Donald Trump for many years, and knowing him, I mean, this is just how he operates, and as we know, he's happy to break with precedent. He wants to break with precedent. He likes to be surrounded by a very small group of people who he trusts. Jared Kushner, is absolutely that person.
Yeah. Yeah. The Trump campaign is a sort of, it's been seen as a fly by the seat of your pants. At least that's how, from the outside in. Now the transition seems to be in turmoil, as I said, but with Kushner at the center of some of this, so-called infighting. But they deny it.
Well,
what's a larger picture here going on?
Just based on my reporting on Jared Kushner, I felt in the summer that there was this aura of calm around him and careful calculation, which seemed, I think very few people in New York understood that, and I think it didn't bother him that nobody in New York understood it. So, just because how it looks to us may not necessarily be what is. I think that Jared Kushner has proven that he is not to be underestimated.
Yeah, it's certainly interesting what you said here in New York. Go ahead, Rebecca.
I was just going to say, we should also mention that Jared Kushner is certainly not any sort of ideologue. He was a Democrat before this campaign, a Democratic contributor. His father was a major Democratic donor. Jared Kushner and Ivanka were very close friends with Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. They raised money for them in their own home. He is someone who is in this to win as an operator, not out of any sort of political ideology. He's not in this because these are necessarily his beliefs. This is all about family, all about loyalty. Yeah. And that adds another layer that some of Trump's other advisors don't have. Might be a reason why that loyalty runs so much deeper with Kushner.
Again, it sounds a lot like Donald Trump. It was a Democrat.
Well, and I was going to say, and actually the Kushners did give to Rudy Giuliani. So, that's welcome to real estate. It's very common in that industry. They butter both sides of the bread.